The way the B2B marketing is actually shifting these days is having a very rich inbound marketing process, right? Where you're driving campaigns out and you're getting traffic in. A lot of purchase behavior that happens on the B2C side is a little more transaction driven. I think in a B2C, the process is longer. You have to look at different stages of that. Different interventions are needed at different stages. There is so much content out there. You need to pretty much get your message across in, say, 20 seconds. And you can't expect them to be with you for probably more than 90 seconds or so. That's how the whole content paradigm is evolving.
Hey there, welcome to Marketing Mavericks with Indiefolio. Today we are joined by Suryadeep Verma, the Chief Marketing Officer at Comviva. Surya's experience spans over 15 years, where he's worked with some prominent companies like IBM, HCL, and now Comviva. I'm excited to know more about his journey and know a lot more about marketing. Thanks for your time, Surya, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Kavan, thanks for having me here. And yeah, looking forward for the conversation.
Fantastic. I'll start off by asking you a little bit more about your journey. I've been doing this podcast with a couple of CMOs, and what I have seen is a lot of engineers end up taking up marketing. And you also had a similar experience. From what I know, you went to IIT, you learned engineering, and then you also joined a public sector bank as a design engineer. What was that which convinced you to, change your focus into marketing and build a career there?
Maybe when I was growing up in my school days, I really hadn't fancied myself as a marketing guy. I was good with science and maths, and that's how I got into engineering. Uh, so engineering, spent about 4 years. I wasn't too excited about a career in engineering per se. I started off working as a design engineer, and my first job was to get into steam turbine engineering, which is a fairly kind of a hardcore technical work. I did that for about 4 years, and then I went on to do my MBA, and that's when my brush with business and marketing and finance happened a bit. Started off actually as a sales guy in a tech company, IBM, and I did sales for about close to 3 years. Then joined a startup. I think my first brush with marketing really happened when I was a part of this company called BMR, where we were setting up a KPO. And I think that's when I started looking after their website, collaterals, pitch, and I mean, I started liking some of that work. I felt communication and messaging is something which is more kind of in line with my DNA. And I think that's how my journey into marketing started. And then I joined IBM back. This was like 2009, where I spent the next 5 years learning marketing, doing multiple roles.
I must ask you, I think when I speak to my friends who are keen about marketing or when they were keen about marketing in college, it's all about, I'll get Shah Rukh in my ad and, I'll have like these big billboards and ads running and things like that. You've focused a lot on B2B marketing, which doesn't necessarily employ those things. So, was getting into B2B a decision or did it happen spontaneously?
I think it happens more spontaneously in terms of the opportunities that you really had.
Hmm.
When I was getting ready for my business, uh, career, one of the things that I wanted to spend my initial years was technology. For some reason, tech industry was something which I wanted to be a part of. The India was going through a big revolution, and I thought, working in a tech company would be nicer because there is so much really happening around. And I started off actually as a sales guy, and looking around, that's the company that I pivoted and moved into marketing.
Right.
And so I think that's how it happened, and that's how I kind of developed into something which was more B2B.
Hmm.
Tech companies have that kind of business construct. So it wasn't, for some interesting reason, I really didn't wanted to do FMCG at the beginning of my career. I mean, there was no reason logic behind that. But it was more of a tech career, something like that, that kind of pushed me there.
Very interesting. So I think you were like, let me tap into a booming industry and find something which I'm good at within that, then the other way around. You got it. And
Absolutely, and it also kind of looked very cerebral in the sense that you're marketing like a tech stuff.
I really want to now, unpack B2B marketing with you because um, with the SaaS boom, there's a huge dearth of people who really understand B2B. Uh, in fact, there are a lot of marketers who've done things who I feel don't really understand the core differentiators between the two. So, would you be able to kind of tell us how B2B marketing is different? So, if somebody today is excited about the SaaS boom, the tech boom, and they want to get into marketing, what they should be prepared for?
So, I think the fundamental difference is here you are dealing with businesses rather than a B2C where you're talking about like a huge chunk of individual consumers or customers here. So largely you are interacting with businesses, and the way decision making happens in businesses is a little different from what it would typically happen with individuals, right? Generally, when you gear up or when you plan marketing for B2C, you have scale in mind. You want to build your brand, which would create a push for your entire business and drive consumption and drive revenue. And people are gonna be pretty much inbound looking for you on web. I think that's the construct. In B2B, you do brand building, right? But some of them is very, very directed and focused in terms of the kind of businesses that you cater to, right? So you don't really go for, uh, you know, uh, ATL strategies like, probably you're going to do a shoot or you're going to put your ad on a billboard. You try to kind of do it in a much more segmented and a much more a focused way, looking at your target segment, right? The other important differentiator is depending upon the industry, you kind of try to build your brand riding on some kind of a differentiator that might be, say, a thought leadership, right? Like the intellectual depth that you have. So you try to kind of create and discover your story in the process. It might be client centricity, it might be the kind of intellectual firepower that you have. So net, I think a very important difference is you want to kind of figure out your DNA in terms of how you are really different, and then you try to disseminate that story through a whole bunch of interactions that you would have with your prospect or a client, which are typically, say, a sales meeting or a workshop or an interaction which is a little more formal, unlike a B2C where you probably are going to look at a little, I mean, you focus more on a ATL kind of a approach. Those fundamentally at some simple level might be the
Follow up
difference.
on that, so can you tell us a little bit more about the real difference between selling to an individual versus a company? And I'll tell you where my question arises from is, at the end of the day, you are any which ways creating content for people in companies, right? So what is different really at its core?
I think I have got this question multiple times, right? End of the day, you are interacting with people, all that. I think that is true at some level, right? Where, on both sides, end of the day, you have people that you are really dealing with. But my sense is that when you look at working or focusing on individuals, you kind of start building on certain very specific personas that, you are marketing with, which might be, say, so the demographics, the personas are fairly well established, right? In the sense that you might be looking at a woman who is, say, in a certain age bracket or has a certain income profile based in a certain geography. And then you start kind of looking at your solution or a offering or a proposition. And then you kind of anchor your marketing around that, right? The fundamental principles with on the business is similar, just that there you are talking about, say, personas like a CEO or a CMO or a different kind of a job function, and then the kind of messaging that you kind of drive are more in terms of business interactions that you're going to kind of take out of. A lot of purchase behavior that happens on the B2C side is a little more, I will say, transaction driven, where people goes to a store and he will buy it, or he goes to a website and he transacts it. So some of those tactics are driving those behaviors. I think in a B2C the process is longer. You have to look at different stages of that. Different interventions are needed at different stages.
Hmm.
So I think those are some of the fundamental difference.
What I take away is that there is like a buying committee in B2B, because it's not really one person's decision to take. But when you're selling to a B2C customer, it's usually like, can I afford it? Do I want it? Great, But the buying
Absolutely.
journey goes through a lot of things. Yeah,
Absolutely. And so I think that's one kind of a big difference. The other thing is the whole kind of transaction cycle itself, that the whole kind of stages of that are a little more uh, complex in a B2B environment versus a kind of a B2C where, a person would kind of go through certain stages and then make the transaction. And he's close to that.
makes sense. Makes sense. Next thing I wanted to move on to was data. We've not really discussed how B2B marketeers leverage data. So I wanted to know from your end, if I was building a CRM, what kind of data should I need to make sure I'm capturing, and how does it usually help?
The way the B2B marketing is actually shifting these days is having a very rich inbound marketing process, right? Where you're driving campaigns out and you're getting traffic in, and then you're trying to track the kind of webs behavior of your visitors on the website in terms of the kind of content they are reading, consuming. What are they doing on your site? What are the related information that they are digging into? I think that is becoming the whole central kind of process around which marketing is revolving, right? So a lot of this is fairly well anchored through your website in terms of what is the kind of visitors, who are they, where are they spending time on, what are the kind of information they are looking at. If somebody is spending more time on the career side, he's a job seeker versus somebody who is spending more time on your solution pages. So I think that's the kind of central piece around which the marketing is kind of revolving now. And a lot of process is actually driven through that in terms of content, the kind of content that you're going to build up, how those content get aligned to your campaigns. And when those campaigns get out, how do you attract some of those visitors back to your website and then record their behavior, which at some stage is also kind of linked to your whole approach of nurturing them over a period of time. If somebody is a repeat visitor, and you try to kind of intercept their time spent through some of the hooks like playbooks and white papers, and try to get a meeting pretty much, try to get an appointment if the visitor is relevant. So I think the whole central piece of uh, you know tracking is built around that. And I think that's how the whole B2B is pretty much evolving. A lot of your social programs, digital programs are pretty much feeding into this whole campaign engine. And I think that's how pretty much the whole soul of marketing is going forward. There are some kind of offline stuff that you do, which would be events, which would be your outreach in terms of demand gen. But I think primarily a lot of this is now getting aligned to this whole process of sharing information, building up a certain kind of a thought leadership position, getting a seat on the table in the sense that you build that credibility, that the people have that faith and assurance that you know your domain, and trying to kind of get their confidence.
Understanding where they are spending their time is really important. We do B2B marketing, and I think that's extremely important to really understand signals, right? To understand when is the right time to ask them for a meeting, because otherwise it's very spammy generally. Now you mentioned white papers and playbooks and things like that, and I've also seen a lot of people do that. As you said, I think that content engine, content machine, publishing, everything has become a big priority for marketers in B2B. But what I don't see a lot of people talking about is solving for distribution. So now that I have created all this content, what's the best way for me to distribute this to my clientele? Because it's not going to go on mainline social media. I don't know, so I'm trying to understand from you, what channels work for you, and if you have any tips to distribute marketing content.
That's actually a problem statement we are also grappling with,
Yeah.
to kind of get the right attention. And what we are observing is that people are reading less, they are watching more.
Mm.
You need to pretty much get your message across in say 20 seconds. That prolongs their kind of view time. And
Mm.
in any which ways, you can't expect them to be with you for probably more than 90 seconds or so. So I
Right.
think that's how the whole content paradigm is evolving.
Mm.
And I see that kind of as a problem statement largely. There is so much content out there that to get your content in front of everybody is a problem, right?
Mm.
But I think
Mm.
the bottom line is really, how do you get your message across? While we do some of these tactics, say it would be distribution through email and WhatsApp and other stuff. I think what works well is when somebody who is in your known circle kind of sharing that personally. Say for example, if you have something which is done for a certain client, and if you know that there is a bunch of sales guys who know this particular gentleman, I think that personalized distribution is something that works better. uh, the other thing has been breaking the monotony in terms of a mix between a digital asset and a physical asset, right? So we have also occasionally started building, books, say for example, which are hard copy, and I think some of that is coming back. People have started kind of looking at a booklet, and they are not now so used to kind of seeing some of those print copies because a lot of companies have stopped doing that. So I think breaking the monotony is important, and some of these things have worked better than the others.
I couldn't agree more. I think, I'm also seeing these testimonials and all those things becoming like video led. And
Yep.
at the end of the day, consumers are consumers, and the world's wanting video more than text any which ways. So that's a big learning. I wanted to know, like, within that only. So while, I think distribution is always going to be the biggest, cog to fix. What has been your general best channels which have given you like very good ROI for your content?
So, say for example, you build an ebook, having them personally delivered to a client. Some of that in a much more personalized manner works best. If you do a mass kind of a socialization or social, etc., they have a limited reach. But if you really want this content be in front of your target segment, you need to find some personalized ways to do that. I mean, some
Right.
of the usual tactics obviously are there in terms of making it a little more provocative, out of ordinary, the imagery. So I'm discounting that, but from a distribution standpoint, how do you kind of stay out of the usual channel? And I think two ways is keeping it very personalized, where say one of the people from the known circle would be distributing it,
Hmm.
and the second is maybe the format, making it in a format which is a little kind of unusual,
Hmm.
unexpected. Say for example, you pack a piece of a content and ship it, which comes like a nice piece of package on the table. People are not expecting these things now. All these used to happen like 10 years back, maybe 15. So how do you kind of keep that element of interest and surprise with that?
Awesome. You, in fact, answered my next question only, which is this huge avalanche of this content, which all B2B companies are making. Like everybody has a playbook, everybody has a white paper. So how do you really cut through the clutter? And I think, as you said, I think personalization is important. Anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, I guess that is gonna become even more pronounced going forward because everybody is jumping to video, everybody is creating
Yeah,
short content and all that stuff. Uh, Getting your stuff noticed would be a big problem. And I think marketers would need to think much more creatively to get
right,
that piece sorted out, right? The
correct.
other piece that has taken off, and I feel that's also coming up, is leveraging influencers in your own segment. You know, it might be influencers in a B2C, it might be analysts and experts in a B2B environment. And I think people do spend a little time and follow them. And so I guess in generally speaking, I think that track I see is coming up well because these are the guys who have been kind of feeding information now.
Hmm.
And you need to find the right voice in your segment.
Interesting. I've not really heard the mention of an influencer before. So when you say an analyst or someone like that, you mean to say it's somebody who is like a strong voice in the network, or you mean to say somebody who has like good LinkedIn followers or something like that?
I would say both.
Okay.
Even a LinkedIn follower in a B2B environment in a B2B environment, a influencer is somebody who is who is being followed because of his expertise in a certain segment, right? So when
Right.
that guy is talking about a certain theme and kind of sharing a piece of a content or an asset, it has much more credibility. So I believe that some of that is going to take off even more going forward. And in a business sense, those are like analysts and guys who are industry watchers and analysts and etc. So I think that is something which probably is going to add much more weight. Just that you have to weigh the ROI. In a B2B scenario, the ROI is becomes very serious when you deal with analysts and
Right.
those guys.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I wanted to jump a little bit like on that personalization topic once. Everybody now and today knows you to personalize, but when it comes to how much personalization is required, is where people don't know what to do. So like I've seen people do 1:1 personalization. I've seen people do segment role based ones. Any tips or advice there here, like what kind of how do you look at personalization and how do you create segmented content?
You're right. Everybody talks about personalization and now see in terms of personalization, you need to really understand your capability to personalize, a certain kind of a campaign and to what level you can granularize it. So, say for example, you're talking about a large opportunity where there are five people who would be really involved and they are the decision maker, right? So when you sit backward, you figure out ways to influence those guys, right?
Hmm.
And that's personalization, in terms of what you can do to get them over to your side, right? So it all depends upon the kind of pursuit you are making, right? The kind of uh, what is the opportunity on the table? What is the opportunity at stake? Generally speaking, you do it by roles, you do it
Hmm.
by titles. You look at a certain problem statement and then look at who are going to be the right personas, and then you create a content. I think that's the general rule. But
Hmm.
if you really feel that there are like few guys who really matter, and you need to win them over that side, that's when you start getting into some very personalized uh, tactics, which might be some account-based activity or some experiential stuff that you're gonna do with some of these guys.
Yeah, there are a lot of founders who watch this podcast who are going 0 to 1, and a lot of marketers who maybe have joined as the first marketer in their company, who maybe might not be as experienced, but are also setting up the marketing function, and they work with us. And very often, I'm asked that, hey, what should be like my KPI, OKR tree of sorts, right? Like, what's the North Star, and how does it really drill down? Obviously at the lower level it's obvious, all your inputs you need to kind of measure, are you publishing things enough, getting clicks and impressions. But in B2B setups, the ROI question always comes, and there's always a fight between the leadership, the sales team, the marketing team as to what attribution of revenue comes from your effort, because usually everybody works together. So what's the usual North Star metric, and if you can tell a little bit more about that?
So generally, you track how much demand you have generated for the business, and that's done on the basis of revenue that you have helped create. I mean, there are two things: one, revenue that you have influenced, and new demand gen that you have created, right? And those are linked back to some of the interactions that you have helped trigger for the business. There are companies where marketing teams are gonna be largely be focusing on revenue progression, which means that there is a decent amount of funnel. So they look at the funnel, and a significant portion of their marketing actions would be in terms of progressing the funnel, right? So you look at a whole bunch of actions that would be, say, around organizing, say, digital actions, which might be a webinar or a roundtable or stuff like that. So I think that's one part of it. And then the second part of it, how many new conversations you help them trigger, which would be new leads, new meetings that you typically do. The progression bit is interesting. The other one is fairly kind of straight to talk. There are a lot of times when in a decision making, the there are a whole bunch of folks involved, and I'm talking about multi-million opportunities. And there are a lot of people who are going to be spending time on your website trying to really see your play. What are you talking about? I mean, whether that shows quality or not. So I think that's where you are even tracking some of your folks. Say, for example, if these are like really 10 important opportunities which are moving in your business, are these guys even spending time on your website to inquire about you, right? And if yes, what are they really doing? So I think some of that you have started now tracking from marketing, and doing campaigns where you try to kind of get them over, and at least have them spending time on your content, right? And I think that's interesting, because a lot of times when key people from organization are on your website, they try to kind of do a 360-degree assessment based on whether they get a sense of quality, whether they get a sense of depth from your overall information-based content. I mean, some of these things speak for themselves. So I think that's the interesting piece. I think the fourth one, the way you also try to see is vis-a-vis your peer group, whether you are getting a premium or not, right? The premium is on brand, right? So, say for example, all things being equal, is your brand being treated with say a more incremental margin when you bid for opportunities? And I think that's a brand play, right? Because the customers are willing to really uh, work with you in spite of the fact that so I think those are the things you really track from a marketing standpoint.
Absolutely. And I think on your last point, today it's just so much easier to build a business and succeed. Everybody looks the same. And I often see the differentiator becomes content design and marketing. It's the way you package and approach things.
True,
A
true.
follow up on that, something which happens around me in my company also is when you look at, let's say, an enterprise deal, the way it happens is you do create demand generation, but then it's the salesperson who tries to quantify what that project value is, right? Because of all the customizations you require. And then finally, there is some revenue contribution to your P&L. So, how is it that sales and marketing are informed, and how are they taking decisions as to, hey, who's attributing what to that revenue? Just wanted to understand. So, is it that, hey, you need to do, let's say, 100 rupees of demand generation, and then sales converts 30 of them, or do you only look at the final number, which is kind of come to the P&L? So, just trying to understand more about that.
That is true. I mean, the whole thing is that you generate an opportunity, but the sales would nurture it and take it forward, and the whole opportunity bit is something that they take a call on. But I think with the CRMs, etc., you keep yourself informed. You pretty much you track the whole progress of that opportunity on the I think it's a little complex aspect in the sense that there is an opportunity out there, and there are times when the sales guy will come back and say, you know what, I have spoken to them, but you know they still are evaluating, and there is nothing this, but they have, the conversation is going on for like 6 weeks, but the sales will still
Right.
say, no, they have not confirmed the opportunity yet, right? So, I mean,
Right.
what I'm wondering is then what are you really doing for those 6 weeks if you really are not able to, uh, you know, quantify it clearly in terms of there's an opportunity or not. The very fact that, there's a conversation happening for 6 weeks means that there is something of interest where even the customer is spending time with you and having that whole meeting, right? So I think that those are some of the conversations that we have, and those are the dilemmas that we kind of run into. There's no kind of a straight answer to that otherwise. The other part is there are opportunities, and sales will take a final call. They may upscale the opportunity, they may downscale the opportunity based on how things are developing. Uh, at the end of the day, you pretty much need to go in terms of what really happened for the business at the end of the day. Now, a smart sales guy may open five new opportunities based on that opportunity. But I think end of the day, from a tracking standpoint, that's what you really looked at.
I'm jumping now to the last part of our podcast. This one's a little bit more about again what we were discussing about this whole content machine, right? Now, I've never seen so many B2B marketers or B2B companies knock on my door saying, we need so much to be done. Over the last 3 years, I've seen just too many companies, and the biggest dilemma they are under in is, do I hire this creative production team in house? Do I outsource it? And I've seen marketing managers do both. They some have insourced, some have outsourced. What's been your take here usually? What do you think if you're creating a content machine? What do you keep in house and what do you outsource?
I'll tell you my central thought around it. See, if you don't have a good content, people will not even give two hoots to that, right? To get that, you need to understand the domain, right? Unless you understand the domain, you don't really. So if you get a technical writer or a content writer who is just gonna put some generic stuff based on like half a day of a research, you're not gonna go anywhere, right? So I think that's fundamental. Uh, so that's like one. To get that piece going, you need a kind of a group that understands the domain, and people who understands content development, which really means that how do you build up the initial draft, interact with the SMEs, enhance it, but you are really pressing the right levers in terms of what you're really talking about, right? So to make that, I think what is really important is focus on your business, understanding the dynamics of the business. So an
Right.
external team is unlikely to kind of help you beyond a
Yeah.
point. Quality of content writing, right? The quality of articulation, the quality of imagery or the graphics or the whole design piece. I think those are the areas where I prefer having an external team so that there is some creativity which is involved because an in-house team will start getting fatigue on the creative bit. So that's where I look at it more in terms of keeping those ideas fresh with the help of an external team. For content, while you rely with a content agency who can kind of do the drafting bit. So in our construct, I think we work with multiple agencies. Some of them have been working with us for a while, so they understand our kind of work areas, solutions, etc. Uh,
Right.
but we work very closely in terms of giving them a brief, trying to explain them in terms of what's happening, right? Uh, and tightly kind of reviewing what is happening,
Right.
getting the core piece from your SMEs. I think that's how it works.
Generally, I hear that if you have somebody in house for content production, it's faster. But I also hear that it's sporadic. Demand is sporadic for that content. So getting somebody on a full-time salary is not, effective resource allocation. Is that generally true for you? And is that's why you outsource, or Why not have any all of these guys in house if you had the option?
First of all, there are so many content formats. There are so many different kind of content that you can't really keep all that content. You'll end up having a huge kind of a content uh, organization within your organization, right? So what you
Hmm.
want to do is work with a team of experts who understand some of the nuances of content development. Having said that, the ideas have to come internally in terms of if you want to put a ebook, what is the purpose of the ebook? What do you really want to talk in the ebook? Rather than talking about having, say, so many ebooks through the year, look at few, but do them well. I think that's the idea.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I'll jump to the last question now, and this is something I've been asking everybody who comes to the podcast, which is obviously artificial intelligence, AI, and what your perspectives are on it. So, of course, we all know AI is here to stay, and we have to kind of embrace it. Since we spoke about B2B marketing, have you planned this year to replace some tasks with AI, or do you still feel it's too early for you to make such a call?
See, the marketing environment, the primary use case which is happening right now is content, right? Which is in terms of creating your communication content, mailers, etc. Now, I mean, AI is gonna be a huge disruptor. There's no two ways about it, right? The point is that it's still pushing the whole boundaries pretty much every quarter, right?
Hmm.
As we do. Initially, people got excited when AI was feeding them a piece of content. Now, it is getting into a stage where it has started creating good videos and imageries, you name it, right?
Right.
I still feel that the primary content development is gonna be the play for at least about a couple of years. On the content side, I think it's gonna be a game changer pretty much, and it has boosted the efficiency in unimaginable ways. If you were creating, say, a piece of blog, which used to take, say, a day, if you if you have a clarity on the core idea, that blog can get created in a matter of hours now, right? So your routine work of using, looking at the right phrases and articulation, I think some of that, and that has made life very helpful for the marketers in particular, right? So whether AI is gonna stay, obviously it's gonna stay. It's gonna be a game changer. Content right now is becoming a big use case, and I see that happening over a period of time is going to be slow on the platform side, where companies are going to look at campaign and building integrated journey, all that. But somewhere down the line, it's going to happen. And I think the core decision making is where, you will have some set of
Hmm.
thinkers who are going to be driving the core. But the routine work is going to be simplified big time.
Got it. So, last part would be, if I was a marketer just out of college, what should be my outlook towards AI? If or rather, if you were just getting out of college, Surya, and you had this thing called AI out here, what would you do? Like, what would be any recommendations you have on how do I embrace it?
See, the most interesting part of AI is it needs to be intuitive. The very fact that, Gen AI became the talk of the town was because it was so intuitive. People can immediately work on AI, unlike, looking at some models, etc. So my sense is that more than learning AI, if you are a marketer, I guess you need to spend significant time on understanding the business that you are in. Number one, AI will be a enabler, a support to you, but understand business, understand how marketing or some of the related tools can really impact your business. Say, for example, if you are into a B2C domain, how you are driving growth through marketing, right? And there are some interesting, I mean, there's a lot of interesting work happening in there. So depending upon your domain, your business, try to kind of see how organizations or how teams are really embracing marketing to drive that piece, right? And I think there is so much to really learn there. There is so much really happening on that side. is what makes the whole kind of function so interesting. This whole art of storytelling is what I think they should look at, and I think it's an amazing time to be a marketer. There is so much that you can really drive being in marketing in these days, right?
Fantastic. I think focusing on the core and just being curious about what's next generally works. So thanks a lot. That marks the end of the podcast. I know you're a busy person, so really appreciate you giving me an hour on a Friday. And it was a great conversation. Learned a lot, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Kaman. It was my pleasure.
Fantastic. And for everybody who's tuned in so far, thanks for doing that firstly. And if you would like to hear another CM or another head of marketing soon, just stay tuned, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll get an update with the next one very, very soon. Thanks everybody. Bye.